So if you're looking for some amazing tips, some resources, some help with relationships, head over to liveasuperchargedlife.com. Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into the world of modern relationships?
I'm ready. It's a fascinating topic.
It really is, especially with how much things have changed. You know, we used to meet through friends or at the coffee shop,
Right.
but now online dating's taken over.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy how it's become the way to meet people.
For real.
Yeah.
Our research shows more folks find love online than through friends these days.
I know, right? And think about this one study found over a third of marriages between 2005 and 2012 actually started online.
Wow, over a third. That's huge. So it's not just a fad, it's how people are actually building lives together.
It really is. But of course, there's some downsides too, right?
Totally. Like ghosting. It's rough.
Ugh, yeah. It's become so common, and it's brutal.
You're just left wondering what happened.
Right. And then there's that whole thing they call digital overwhelm. It can be exhausting.
Oh yeah, I feel that. Just endless profiles trying to stand out.
Exactly. It's like being at a buffet with too many choices.
You just end up feeling overwhelmed and not enjoying anything.
Perfect analogy. That's exactly how it feels sometimes.
So we've got these new ways of meeting, new challenges, but what about actually building a relationship that lasts?
Well, that's where the research gets really interesting. One source talked about 3 key things: emotional intelligence, communication patterns, and building trust.
Okay, those make sense. Let's break them down. Emotional intelligence, that sounds important.
It is. It's all about recognizing and managing your emotions and your partner's emotions.
So being able to read the room, understand how your partner feels, respond in a way that makes sense.
Exactly. Couples who are good at this, they tend to have smoother relationships, less conflict, more understanding.
That makes sense. But how do you actually get better at emotional intelligence?
There are things you can try, like using I statements when you disagree. So instead of saying, "you always interrupt me," which can sound blaming, you could say, "I feel unheard when I'm interrupted."
That's a good example. Shifting the focus to your own experience.
Right, it can make a big difference. And remember, it's a skill. Like learning a language, the more you practice, the better you get.
Okay, that's emotional intelligence. What about communication patterns? Everyone says communication is key, but what does that actually look like in a good relationship?
It's about more than just talking, for sure. It's about really listening, putting your phone down, making eye contact, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that sometimes. My mind starts racing with what I want to say next.
We all do it. But when you actively listen, your partner feels heard. And then being honest and open, even when it's tough.
That's where trust comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
This research really highlighted that as the foundation of any lasting relationship.
Totally. If you don't feel like you can trust your partner, the whole thing feels shaky.
And building trust takes time.
Right. It's about consistency. Keeping your promises, being there for each other, being honest even when it's hard.
Like proving through your actions that your partner can count on you. What happens when that trust is broken? Can you ever really fix it?
It's tough, for sure. But it can be done. It takes real apologies, commitment to change, and both people willing to put in the work. Sometimes seeing a therapist can help too.
So rebuilding trust isn't a quick fix. It's a process.
Exactly. And sometimes, even with effort, it might not work out. But knowing when to move on is important too.
That's a good point. Taking care of yourself is essential.
It really is. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel safe and respected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered how couples meet, the science of making it work, even the tough stuff like broken trust. But let's switch gears a bit. What about those early dating stages, you know, the butterflies in the stomach phase?
The beginning. One article had some great tips for that, like be yourself, don't try to be someone you're not just to impress someone.
You know, like wearing a mask. Eventually you have to take it off.
Exactly. Plus, wouldn't you rather be with someone who likes the real you?
For sure. What other tips for early dating stood out to you?
Communication was a big one. Like, go beyond small talk. Have real conversations. Ask questions that show you're interested. And they talked about how important phone calls are, even in this day and age.
Interesting. Why are phone calls so important?
It's a deeper connection. You hear someone's voice, their laughter. It's richer than texting.
It's like taking things off the screen and into real life.
Exactly. And you avoid those misunderstandings that happen over text.
Plus, let's be honest, a good phone call can be way more fun than texting back and forth forever.
Right. And if someone doesn't want to talk on the phone, maybe that's a red flag.
Good point. It could mean they're not really interested.
Or maybe they're not ready to be vulnerable.
This is all really helpful. What else did the research say about those early stages?
Noticing chemistry and compatibility early on is important.
Like, do you feel that spark? Do you just get each other?
Yeah, exactly. Those little signs that you click, sometimes you just know.
That's a good feeling.
It is. And they also talked about taking things slow, not rushing into anything.
That's so important these days. It's easy to want everything instantly.
I know. But pacing yourself gives you time to really get to know someone.
It's like enjoying a delicious meal. You don't want to scarf it all down at once.
Love that. That's exactly how it should be.
So we've talked about how couples meet, the science of making relationships work, even navigating those early dates.
It's a lot to take in, but it's all about building those strong connections.
And we're not done yet.
Nope, we've got more to explore. Okay, so we've talked about those early stages, but now I'm thinking, how do we go from those first dates to a relationship that can really last?
That's the big question, right? Because that initial excitement fades and real life sets in. How do we make it work through all the ups and downs?
Well, the research has some good advice on that. One study talked about 3 key things. Quality time, growing together and separately, and keeping that spark alive.
Yeah, okay, those sound important. So quality time. Okay, what does that even mean these days? We're all so busy.
It's about being intentional, even for just a few minutes each day. Put the phones down, close the laptops, really focus on connecting.
So simple, but so hard sometimes.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in everything else. But even just cooking a meal together, taking a walk, having a real conversation, those moments make a difference.
It's about making time for each other, even when life feels crazy.
Exactly. What about that idea of growing together, but also separately? That seems tricky.
It does. How do you support each other's individual goals and dreams, but also stay connected as a couple?
Think of it like 2 plants growing side by side. Each one needs its own space, but their roots are intertwined.
I like that. So how do we actually do that?
Communication is key. Talk about your hopes, your fears, your passions. Be each other's cheerleaders.
Create a safe space to be yourselves, both together and individually.
That's it. And when you both feel supported, the relationship can grow too. And then there's that whole keeping the spark alive thing. That's what everyone wants to know, right?
Totally. How do you maintain that excitement, that romance, after years together?
One of the studies said trying new things together is huge. Get out of your comfort zone, try a new hobby, travel somewhere new.
Keep things interesting. Keep having adventures together.
Yeah, remind yourselves that life is exciting, but it doesn't have to be all big trips and grand gestures. Little things matter too.
Yeah, what are some of those little things?
Physical affection, for one. Never underestimate the power of a hug or holding hands.
It's easy to forget those simple things when you get busy.
It is. And of course, make time for intimacy. That's a big part of a healthy relationship too.
Right, and then there are those small, thoughtful gestures. A love note, a surprise date night, a little gift, just because.
It shows you're thinking of them, that you appreciate them.
Those little things really do add up. Okay, so we've talked about building that strong foundation, nurturing the connection, keeping the spark alive. But what about when things aren't going so well? When maybe it's time to move on?
That's a tough one. And actually, the research we looked at talks about some red flags to watch out for. One of the biggest ones is controlling behavior.
Ooh, yeah. That's scary. It's not about love, it's about power.
Exactly. And it can be subtle at first.
Like, how does that even start?
Maybe little comments, trying to isolate you from friends and family, checking your phone.
It can escalate quickly.
It can, and that's why it's so important to set boundaries early on.
What are some other red flags we should be aware of?
Lack of respect and trust, for sure. Those are fundamental. If your partner doesn't respect you, breaks promises, betrays your trust,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah, those are hard to come back from.
They are. You deserve to be with someone who treats you well. And speaking of things that are hard to deal with, one of the sources talked about gaslighting. Have you heard of that?
I've heard the term, but I'm not totally sure what it means.
It's a form of manipulation where someone tries to make you doubt your own reality.
Whoa, that sounds messed up.
It is. Like, they might deny things that happened or tell you you're being crazy for feeling a certain way.
So if you constantly feel like you're wrong, or like your feelings don't matter,
That's a huge red flag. Gaslighting is serious, and if you're experiencing it, getting support is so important.
this is all really important stuff. Sometimes it's hard to see these red flags when you're in the middle of it.
You're right. That's why trusting your gut is so important. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore it.
Talk to someone you trust. Get help if you need it.
Exactly. Protecting yourself is key. You know, one thing that stood out to me in all this research was the importance of setting boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah. Those can be tough to figure out.
They can, but they're really important for any healthy relationship.
It's about knowing what you're comfortable with and communicating that clearly.
Right. It's not about being controlling, it's about taking care of yourself. And, you know, if your partner can't respect those boundaries, that's a sign they might not be the right person for you.
Even if you love them.
Even if you love them. It's tough, but sometimes walking away is the healthiest thing you can do.
Okay, so we've really dug into modern relationships, haven't we? Everything from meeting someone special to keeping the spark alive long term. But I have to say, I'm wondering about something.
What's that?
Well, life just feels so fast-paced these days. We're constantly bombarded with stuff, you know. Does that make it even harder to have those deep, meaningful relationships? Like, is it even possible to slow down enough to really connect?
That's such a good question. And it's something I think about a lot too. I mean, it's a challenge we all face.
Because it's not just romantic relationships, right? It's friendships, family, even our relationship with ourselves.
Exactly. How do we stay connected when everything feels so rushed?
Right.
Well, one thing that really struck me in the research was the idea of mindfulness. Just being present in the moment, really focusing on the person you're with instead of your phone or whatever else is going on.
Mindfulness, I've tried that, but man, it's hard.
I know, it takes practice. But even small things can help, like when you're having dinner with a friend, put your phone away, make eye contact, listen to what they're saying. Resist that urge to check your notifications.
Like a little digital detox.
Exactly. Creating those spaces where you can just be present. And I think setting boundaries with technology in general is important too. Like maybe have certain times of day where you don't use your phone at all. Or create rituals that encourage connection, like family dinners without screens.
Those are good ideas.
Yeah.
It's like consciously creating space for connection, you know? Because the world kind of pulls us in the opposite direction sometimes.
It does, but those deep connections are worth it. They make life so much richer.
Totally agree. Well, I think we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We talked about how the dating world has changed, the science behind making relationships work, those red flags to watch out for.
We talked about emotional intelligence, communication, trust, keeping the spark alive.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that relationships are a journey, not a destination. There are going to be ups and downs, but it's about showing up, communicating honestly, being there for each other.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, it's okay to ask for help along the way. Talking to a therapist or a trusted friend can make a world of difference.
Definitely. It's all about learning and growing. Speaking of which, we wanted to share a great resource for anyone who wants to dive deeper into this stuff.
Yes, all of the research we've been talking about comes from Live a Supercharged Life. They have a website and a podcast, and they offer so much great information about relationships, personal growth, all of that.
They have articles, podcasts, even online courses. If you want to learn more, check them out at livesuperchargedlife.com.
So many great resources.
Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. It's been a great conversation.
It has.
And to everyone listening, remember, you deserve to be in relationships that make you happy. Keep learning, keep connecting, and keep living that supercharged life. So if you're looking for some amazing tips, some resources, some help with relationships, head over to liveasuperchargedlife.com. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.